I thought it was just a friendly chat, until she confessed feelings I never saw coming. It's concise, intriguing, and sets up immediate emotional tension while hinting at forbidden attraction. It started as an ordinary evening. The sky painted in soft shades of orange and pink, the neighborhood quiet except for the occasional hum of a passing car. Walking back from a late errand, the 22-year-old narrator noticed movement near the house next door. There she was, his neighbor's wife, a 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair that fell effortlessly over her shoulders, lightly tanned skin with subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and a graceful, curvy posture that carried confidence without arrogance. Her dark brown eyes met his briefly, a flicker of curiosity or perhaps recognition passing through them. She was dressed casually yet elegantly, a fitted blouse paired with a knee-length skirt that accentuated her mature beauty and sophistication. The porch light illuminated her face, highlighting the gentle crinkles at the corners of her eyes, the soft curve of her lips, and the faint warmth of a smile that seemed both welcoming and enigmatic. It was the kind of smile that made the world pause, a quiet magnetism that drew attention without effort. Their initial conversation was simple, a polite exchange about the evening air, the neighbors' trivial observations about the street. Yet, beneath the casual words, there was a subtle tension, a slow-burning awareness of each other's presence. He noticed the way her hand lingered slightly on the railing as she leaned forward to emphasize a point, the way her gaze seemed to hold his affection longer than polite decorum required. Every gesture carried a weight he wasn't expecting, awakening an unfamiliar flutter in his chest. Even the small sensory details were impossible to ignore. The faint floral scent of her perfume mixed with the cool evening breeze, the soft rustle of her skirt as she shifted her weight, the slight warmth radiating from her as she gestured naturally. Every subtlety contributed to an undeniable attraction he couldn't fully process. The world around them, the quiet street, the glowing porch light, the distant chirping of crickets, seemed to fade, leaving only the intensity of that single interaction. He found himself laughing a little too freely at a joke she made, noting the ease in her posture, the gentle curve of her hands as she emphasized her words. She, in turn, seemed intrigued by his sincerity, the way he observed her without pretense, the honesty in his responses. It was a first encounter, yet it carried a weight of possibility, an unspoken understanding that this moment was more than mere neighborly pleasantries. As the conversation drew to a close, she waved softly, her smile lingering, eyes glinting with quiet curiosity. He walked away feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and confusion, the encounter lingering in his mind like a warm, persistent glow. That evening, the ordinary had shifted. Something unspoken had passed between them, subtle yet undeniable. The first spark of a connection that promised curiosity, tension, and a slow-burning intrigue that would grow in the days to come. After that first unexpected encounter, the days that followed were filled with seemingly ordinary interactions that carried an unusual undercurrent. The 22-year-old narrator began noticing her presence more acutely. The 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure with graceful posture, and dark brown eyes seemed to appear at moments that felt coincidental yet deliberate. She wore simple yet elegant outfits, a light blouse paired with tailored pants or a soft cardigan over a casual dress, emphasizing her mature, poised beauty while remaining approachable. Each interaction was brief but meaningful. Borrowing sugar, passing in the hallway, or exchanging a casual greeting at the mailbox. Ordinary gestures became charged with subtle tension. There was the way her fingers brushed his for just a heartbeat when handing over a small item, the slight pause in her steps as she met his gaze, the soft warmth in her smile that lingered a fraction too long to be purely polite. Bright afternoon sunlight illuminated these moments, making every detail, the curve of her lips, the twinkle in her dark brown eyes, the natural sway of her hair, impossible to ignore. Their conversations were light on the surface. Neighborhood news, weather, or small talk about plants and pets. But beneath every word was a quiet, growing awareness of each other. He found himself leaning in slightly, drawn to her warmth, her calm presence, and the subtle vulnerability that peeked through her confident exterior. She, in turn, seemed intrigued by his attentiveness, the sincerity in his eyes, the gentle way he listened without interrupting. Physical contact remained minimal, yet each brush of hands, accidental touch on the arm, or gentle nudge carried a magnetic pull. When she laughed at something he said, the sound was soft yet vibrant, echoing in the quiet street or the sunlit hallway. The warmth of her laughter made him acutely aware of her nearness, the faint floral scent of her perfume lingering in the air long after she walked away. These sensory details heightened the slow-burning tension between them, creating a sense of intimacy in the mundane. Even their body language spoke volumes. She would subtly tilt her head, resting lightly against the railing as she listened, or angle her body toward him in conversation, a slight lean that closed the invisible distance between them. He noticed these small gestures, the natural ease of her posture, the way her curvy frame moved gracefully even in simple tasks. Every interaction, no matter how brief, left an imprint, a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of mutual attraction that neither dared to name aloud. By the end of the week, what had once been ordinary neighborly exchanges had transformed into moments laden with curiosity, excitement, and emotional anticipation. Each smile, each casual touch, and each lingering glance carried meaning beyond words. The narrator felt a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness, aware that their growing connection was stepping into uncharted territory. These small, charged interactions became the foundation of a slow-burn romance, subtle, delicate, and undeniably magnetic. The tension was no longer just internal. It existed between them, shaping every encounter with a quiet intensity that promised emotional depth, eventual revelation, and a story that would evolve far beyond casual neighborly acquaintance. One evening, a few days after their small, charged interactions, she invited him over to help with a minor household task, fixing a loose shelf in her living room. The invitation felt casual, but the 22-year-old narrator sensed a quiet significance in it. The 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure with graceful posture, and dark brown eyes carried herself with the same poised confidence he had begun to notice. She wore a soft, pastel blouse with tailored jeans, comfortable yet elegant, and her subtle perfume floated in the air as he entered. The living room was bright, bathed in soft evening sunlight that streamed through the large windows. The faint hum of a ceiling fan created a soothing background, while the occasional creak of the floor under their movements punctuated the quiet intimacy of the space. As he handed her tools, their fingers brushed briefly, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. It was enough to send a subtle warmth through him, a quiet acknowledgement of the growing unspoken connection between them. They worked together with ease, their conversation flowing naturally. The dialogue remained light, casual comments about the neighborhood, stories about pets, or shared laughter over minor mishaps. But there was a deeper layer beneath it. His eyes caught the way her shoulders relaxed in his presence, the way her dark brown eyes softened when she smiled, and the slight curve of her lips when she laughed at something simple yet meaningful. These subtle cues, combined with her gentle posture and graceful movements, conveyed a vulnerability he hadn't seen in her before. When she reached for a tool and their hands met again, he noticed the subtle tension, the quiet electricity that seemed to pass between them. The physical contact was brief, non-sexual, yet intimate. A hand brushing his as she handed him a screwdriver, a slight nudge of her shoulder against his as they moved past each other. Each touch carried meaning, communicating comfort, trust, and a tentative curiosity about something more. Her voice, soft and warm, added to the intensity of the moment. Even in casual conversation, there was a rhythm to her speech that drew him in, pauses that lingered, glances that held weight, a quiet steadiness that made the mundane task feel significant. He found himself observing her small gestures, the tilt of her head, the graceful sweep of her hair behind her shoulder, the gentle way she leaned slightly closer when explaining something. Every detail reinforced the subtle intimacy developing between them. By the time the shelf was fixed, the room felt charged with unspoken emotions. Neither spoke about attraction, yet it was undeniable. Their laughter lingered longer than necessary. Their glances held a quiet depth, and the brief touches spoke volumes. The emotional goal of this moment was clear: to deepen the connection, establish trust, and show that attraction and care were building naturally, delicately, and respectfully. As he left her home, the echo of her laughter and the warmth of her presence stayed with him. The unspoken connection was no longer subtle. It had taken root in shared moments, quiet gestures, and the growing awareness of mutual curiosity and emotional intrigue. The story was moving forward, slow and deliberate, toward a revelation that would test their boundaries and deepen their bond. The evening had a quiet intensity that made ordinary sounds feel sharper. The distant hum of cars, the faint rustle of leaves outside, even the soft tick of a wall clock seemed amplified in the bright, cozy living room. The 22-year-old narrator found himself seated across from the 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure with graceful posture, and dark brown eyes. She wore a soft, lavender blouse paired with casual trousers, her mature beauty radiating quiet confidence yet tinged with vulnerability. The conversation had started casually, about books and neighborhood happenings, but a shift occurred, subtle and deliberate. Her gaze lingered, steady and searching, as if weighing whether to speak. The emotional tension in the room was palpable, a slow-burning anticipation that made his heart race. He noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she set a mug of tea on the table, the faint tightening of her shoulders, the way her dark brown eyes darted to his and then away, as though gathering courage. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. Her voice was soft, deliberate, and almost hesitant, carrying the weight of emotions she had long kept hidden. She admitted, gently, carefully, that she had been drawn to him in ways she hadn't anticipated, that the small moments they had shared had lingered in her mind. The confession wasn't dramatic or demanding. It was quiet, intimate, and filled with vulnerability. Each word was measured, and the sincerity in her tone made it impossible to dismiss. The narrator's attention was riveted. Every detail, the warmth of her voice, the slight quiver as she spoke, the gentle tilt of her head, the soft curve of her lips, made the moment feel charged with emotional gravity. When her hand brushed his arm accidentally, he felt a warmth ripple through him, a quiet acknowledgement of the intensity between them. Her touch was gentle but deliberate, soft enough to be polite, yet intimate enough to convey the depth of her feelings. The room felt simultaneously expansive and contained. The bright light spilling in from the windows highlighted the subtle expressions on her face. A furrowed brow of worry, the faint smile that hinted at hope, the glimmer of nervous excitement in her dark brown eyes. He noticed the small laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, the graceful curve of her posture, the natural elegance in her movements, all reinforcing the reality of her age and the depth of her lived experience. Shock, disbelief, curiosity, and a quiet thrill surged through him. His mind raced, torn between the moral and social implications of the revelation and the undeniable magnetic pull of her presence. Every fiber of his being was aware of the tension, the unspoken desire, and the fragile beauty of her honesty. By the time she finished speaking, the room was filled with a charged silence. The emotional goal of this moment was clear: to create a turning point where hidden feelings are revealed, where both characters confront the reality of attraction, and where the slow-burn tension escalates to a deeply human, YouTube-safe emotional climax. The confession wasn't just words. It was a delicate dance of vulnerability, trust, and the undeniable spark of a connection that could no longer be ignored. The moment of her confession lingered long after he stepped outside her bright living room, the evening air cool against his skin, carrying the faint scent of garden flowers from the neighbor's yard. The 22-year-old narrator walked slowly down the sidewalk, his thoughts a whirlwind of shock, curiosity, and moral contemplation. The 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure with graceful posture, and dark brown eyes had revealed her feelings with a quiet honesty that made it impossible to ignore. Every word she had spoken replayed in his mind. The warmth in her voice, the subtle tremor of her hand as she reached for her mug, the steady gaze that seemed to search his soul. He paused by a street lamp, the golden glow illuminating the conflicting emotions etched on his face. The tactile memory of her gentle touch, her fingertips brushing his arm, the warmth of her hand, pressed against him like a silent reminder of the intimacy they had just shared. Each sensation, each subtle detail, made the reality of her feelings undeniable, and yet the weight of social norms, the fact that she was married, and the possible consequences loomed heavily in his thoughts. The bright, serene suburban environment around him contrasted sharply with the storm of his emotions, emphasizing the surreal nature of the moment. At home, he sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped together as he tried to untangle his emotions. The soft, warm light of his bedside lamp highlighted his uncertainty, the tension in his shoulders, and the slight furrow of his brow. He replayed each interaction with her. The casual smiles, the lingering glances, the subtle brushes of hands, and began to understand the depth of the connection they shared. Every detail, from the curve of her lips to the soft laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, reinforced that her attraction was genuine, heartfelt, and deeply human. Meanwhile, she too wrestled with her emotions. The 42-year-old woman experienced a mix of guilt and longing, aware of the moral boundaries and the societal expectations that weighed heavily on her. Yet, there was a spark of excitement she could not ignore, a sense of emotional fulfillment in sharing her truth. In her brightly lit home, she lingered by the window, reflecting on his expressions, the way his dark brown eyes had widened slightly in surprise, the subtle warmth that passed between them, and the sincerity that radiated from him. The emotional goal of this part is hesitation, reflection, and internal conflict. Both characters are aware of the gravity of the situation, yet they are drawn together by an unspoken, magnetic pull. Their inner worlds are in tension, curiosity versus morality, desire versus restraint, and this internal struggle creates a palpable suspense for the audience. By the end of this reflective pause, both characters have acknowledged the depth of their attraction in their own minds, even if neither speaks aloud. The story has reached a moment of quiet intensity, where every glance, every remembered touch, and every internal dialogue sets the stage for the slow-burn development of their bond, heightening anticipation for what will come next. The audience feels both the weight of hesitation and the thrill of potential emotional intimacy, keeping them deeply invested in the story's progression. The following evening, the air carried a gentle warmth as the 22-year-old narrator approached her porch, the soft glow of the outdoor lights casting long, inviting shadows. The 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure with graceful posture, and dark brown eyes was already there, seated gracefully in a wicker chair. She wore a comfortable yet elegant blouse with soft, tailored trousers, her mature beauty radiating quiet confidence, yet revealing a hint of vulnerability. The bright evening ensured every detail was clear, the faint freckles on her cheeks, the soft curve of her lips, the delicate lines at the corners of her eyes, all contributing to her genuine, approachable presence. As he greeted her, their eyes met, and the unspoken tension of the previous encounter hung in the air. There was no need for words. The memory of her confession had already shifted the dynamic between them. The emotional goal was subtle intimacy, a shared understanding that existed without explicit discussion, a delicate dance of acknowledgement and restraint. Their conversation began cautiously, about ordinary matters. The weather, a neighborhood sighting, a shared anecdote. Yet, every sentence carried undertones of the emotions simmering beneath the surface. When he handed her a mug of tea, their fingers brushed, brief but charged. She looked down momentarily, a soft flush rising to her cheeks, before meeting his gaze again, dark brown eyes steady and warm. The gentle touch was enough to communicate connection and care without crossing boundaries, the warmth lingering like a quiet echo in the air between them. They spoke about small, personal experiences, favorite books, memories from the past, the small joys and struggles of everyday life. Each anecdote was punctuated by brief, unintentional touches. A hand resting lightly on a knee to emphasize a point, fingers grazing as they exchanged objects, shoulders brushing when adjusting positions on the porch swing. The narrator noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the way she leaned in slightly when listening, and the way her eyes seemed to search for understanding and reassurance. Bright streetlights illuminated the porch, creating an inviting, warm atmosphere that highlighted every detail of their interaction. Her perfume mingled with the crisp evening air, and the quiet rustle of leaves added a soft soundtrack to their proximity. There was laughter, soft, genuine, easy, but beneath it lay a deep emotional resonance. Their mutual understanding grew in these small gestures, in the silence shared, in the attention given without expectation. By the end of the evening, both felt a sense of connection and quiet satisfaction. No words could fully express the subtle bond forming between them, but it was undeniably present, a mixture of empathy, attraction, and respect. The story's emotional goal here was to deepen the slow-burn intimacy. The audience could sense the growing trust, the shared warmth, and the anticipation of something more, all while keeping the interaction respectful, YouTube-safe, and deeply human. The night ended with a lingering glance, a soft smile, and a quiet awareness that both were drawn to each other in a way that could not be ignored, setting the stage for the final act of emotional resolution. The days following their quiet understanding were filled with a calm, reflective intimacy. The 22-year-old narrator noticed her presence more keenly in small, everyday moments. The bright porch light illuminating her long black hair as she tended to her garden, her dark brown eyes softening when their paths crossed, the gentle curve of her lips hinting at unspoken warmth. The 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, and graceful posture moved with her usual poise. But now there was a gentle openness in her demeanor, a quiet acknowledgement of the emotional bond forming between them. One afternoon, he found himself stopping by to return a book she had lent him. She greeted him with a slight smile, her blouse catching the sunlight, emphasizing her natural elegance and MILF-like beauty. Her subtle perfume mingled with the fresh air, and the bright, open living room behind her reflected a safe, welcoming environment. The emotional goal was to convey warmth and human connection. No rush, no pressure, just presence and recognition of feelings. As they talked about mundane matters, their gestures carried silent communication. A brief touch on the hand as she handed him the book, a fleeting glance that lingered just a second too long, a shared laugh that resonated in the bright room. Each moment reinforced the intimacy that had grown between them. She leaned slightly toward him when listening, her posture graceful yet inviting, while he responded with quiet attentiveness, conscious of the subtle tension and the careful boundaries they were maintaining. The narrator noticed the depth in her dark brown eyes, the soft laugh lines that spoke of life experience, and the gentle warmth in her expressions. Bright sunlight illuminated every detail, the delicate freckles on her cheeks, the smooth curve of her arms as she gestured, and the soft sway of her hair when she moved. Their connection was palpable but restrained, a tender acknowledgement of feelings that had matured into quiet affection and understanding. At a natural pause in the conversation, she reached out, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder, the gesture conveying reassurance, care, and the unspoken promise of trust. The narrator felt a comforting warmth, a sense of grounding in her presence. It was a non-sexual touch, yet it carried the full weight of emotional intimacy, respect, admiration, and genuine human connection. The bright afternoon light highlighted her curves, her posture, and her mature beauty, making the moment vivid, relatable, and heartfelt for the audience. By the end of the visit, there was a sense of closure and fulfillment. Their eyes met in a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual attraction tempered by respect, maturity, and emotional awareness. The story's resolution was warm, human, and YouTube-safe. Tension had transformed into intimacy without overstepping boundaries, leaving the audience with satisfaction and emotional resonance. As he walked away, the warmth of her presence lingered in his mind, a quiet glow that promised connection and understanding. Both characters had navigated hesitation, vulnerability, and unspoken desire to arrive at a place of shared emotional intimacy, creating a slow-burn romance that was complete, satisfying, and deeply human. The bright, open environment, the sunlight, fresh air, and inviting living spaces reflected the clarity and positivity of their bond, ending the story on a note of emotional fulfillment and gentle, respectful romance.